Hey, welcome back for another segment here on twitch.tv/AWS. My name is Gabe Hollenby. I'm a technical evangelist with AWS, and for this segment, we're going to talk about a few different things related to Amazon EC2. First up, let's just cover introductions, and then we'll get right into it.
Hi, I'm Murtaza Chaudhry. I'm a senior product manager in Amazon EC2.
My name is Anup Kapoor. I'm the senior product manager for the auto-scaling service.
And I'm Mike Coleman. I am a developer advocate on Amazon Lightsail.
Thank you, gentlemen. So first up, let's just quickly cover what EC2 is before we talk about some exciting new features. So EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud, and that's our service that lets customers provision virtual machines for all different kinds of workloads in the cloud. You can get ones that are optimized for high memory usage, or for high I/O, disk I/O, for network throughput, whatever workload you need, there's a virtual machine instance type to fit that workload. And you can spin these up, you can spin them down. There's a number of different features available for connecting different types of disks to it, both block storage and networked file storage, all that sort of stuff. But we have exciting new things to cover here. So let's just get right into it with a new feature we've announced, which is predictive scaling for EC2. Anup, what is predictive scaling? And maybe also before we talk about that, how does that relate to what we already had, which is auto scaling?
So auto-scaling is a service that helps with the capacity management of your resources. For almost a decade, we have been supporting EC2, and over the last few years, we've been supporting even more services than EC2. So today we support 7 additional services. And one of the core capabilities of auto-scaling is to be able to automatically adjust your capacity using target tracking.
Right.
Target tracking is nothing but just works just like a thermostat in your home. All you've got to do is just select a metric you want to scale on and set the target for that. So for example, you want to scale on your average CPU utilization, you want to keep that at a certain level. You pick that, set the target 50%, and then from there, target tracking is just going to do all the work to either add or remove instances to keep it at the target. If you have patterns that you know of, for example, morning to evening, 9 to 5 patterns, weekly patterns, more complex patterns, you can definitely provision capacity at preset times as well.
Okay, and so how does predictive scaling relate to this? What is this new feature all about?
So a number of customers have told us that they'd like to provision the capacity ahead of the changes in traffic. And this is extremely useful when you have traffic and when you're going to have steep spikes or you have long warm-up times. So predictive scaling is just developed for that. And all in all, auto-scaling enhanced with predictive scaling really makes scaling faster, simpler, and more accurate.
Okay, and so what is predictive scaling? What data is it using in order to make its predictions, and how does that work?
So predictive scaling, we are using machine learning and models which have been trained using billions of data points that we have from Amazon.com. It uses a load metric, and load metric is basically the overall traffic coming into your auto-scaling group, which is the total traffic coming to your application essentially. And then we use a scaling metric. Scaling metric is, for example, the CPU utilization that you want to maintain at a certain level. So you provide these, and then after that we run a regression analysis on the scaling metric and the load metric, and based on that we can understand how much work each instance can handle. And then based on that, predictive scaling uses that analysis to schedule a series of actions to be able to adjust the minimum capacity so that you can have that capacity ahead of your traffic.
Cool, awesome, thank you. I wish we had more time to talk about that, but we have to move on because we have more exciting things to talk about on stream. So still sticking with you, Anup, the other exciting new feature we've announced is on-demand hibernation for EC2. I think this one is really cool. Let's tell the viewers about that.
So OT hibernation, so essentially when you hibernate an instance, all your data in the EBS volume, which is the root volume, and any other EBS volumes that are attached to the instance, the data in those is persisted. Additionally with those, the data in the memory and in the RAM is persisted along with the root volume as well.
So this is just like if I close my laptop lid and the machine goes to sleep, and then I open it later, all the applications I had that were running are still just there just as I left them. Except now this is that power on an EC2 instance.
Absolutely. And as soon as the instance you resume that, all the memory is reloaded into the machine and you just pick it up from wherever you left.
And so that's how it differs between a regular stop versus a hibernate, right? Can you just be explicit about the differences there?
Yes. So in a regular stop, basically you are persisting the state of the EBS volumes, which is the root volume and the volumes which are attached to it. But in case of Hibernate, you are persisting the state of the memory as well.
Cool, okay, and just real quick, what instance types does this currently work on?
So this is going to support all ABS-backed instances without local storage. So that's with the C family, the R family, and the M family.
Yep.
And as with the operating systems, we are supporting Amazon Linux, and then very soon we are going to be extending this to Amazon Linux 2, Windows, and Ubuntu.
Awesome, thanks. Let's move on now and let's talk about another new feature with EC2, which is a license manager. Murtaza, you want to tell us about that?
Sure. So managing licenses has been a long-standing problem. Customers, especially enterprises, have problems staying compliant, controlling overages, and managing vendor audits. And especially with the agility of cloud, it gets even harder. So we have this new service called AWS License Manager. This is a one-stop solution for managing licenses across a variety of software vendors, such as Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, IBM, and others.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Do you want to show some slides while you're talking?
Yes.
Okay, can we make sure we're showing the slides that he's got too? Great, okay, go on.
All right, so talking about the service, this service helps enterprises to manage licenses across hybrid environments, across AWS and on-premises. Customers can proactively control overages and set up terms based on their organizational structure and processes. And the service has built-in integration with various services in AWS so that customers can manage their licenses seamlessly across the services, across hybrid environments, and across their own accounts. Let's talk about getting started. Getting started with this service is easy. So first step is bringing in the terms in the license agreement as rules in AWS License Manager. Once these rules are brought in, customers can enforce the rules through a variety of mechanisms, such as their AMIs, EC2 launch templates, CloudFormation templates, or even set up cloud governance through service catalog. And once they have set up, that's all they need to do. The users in the organization, they spin up instances and they go with business as usual. And this service has built-in dashboards that license administrators can look at to measure usage and report out when there is a vendor audit. The service is available today. You can get started using AWS License Manager from the Management Console. It's available under Management Tools. We'll have some demonstrations today. We have a session at 7 p.m. today. Here's the location on the slide. Please join us to go through the capabilities of this service.
Thanks, I have some follow-up questions for you on this.
Sure.
So how is License Manager priced?
Yes. So the License Manager service has integration with various services in AWS. So customers pay for the resources they use in their accounts, but there are no additional charges for using this service.
Awesome. And are there any customers that are currently using or planning to use License Manager that you can talk about for our viewers?
Yes, we ran a private preview of this service, and we have customers who are using this service currently, and we have customers such as Xero, who is a leading business accounting software platform, a software as a service provider, who is using this service to manage their SQL Server licenses and help them in their audit process. There is also Pearson, who is a leader in the educational space and is using AWS License Manager to significantly reduce the time and effort they spend in managing licenses.
Cool, great, thanks. I've got some questions from the stream. I'm just going to pass one. This one's actually for you, Anoop, if you don't mind. Something about hibernating instances. Can you mention some production use cases around hibernating instances? When would this be a good idea?
Yeah, so one of the major use cases is the applications which have longer bootstrapping times. So one use case we see is a web application which is serving responses, and for the optimal responses, it's dependent on the in-memory cache. And say, for example, the in-memory cache is a 20 GB index. It's going to take a long time to get that instance up and running. Whereas if you use Hibernate, as soon as the cache is filled, you just end up hibernating the instance, and then whenever you need that back, you can just bring it back wherever you left in no time.
Cool, thanks. So that question was from Omnipotent42 on Twitch, by the way. Thanks for that question. One for you, Murtaza, about, so the question is, how do you input licenses? David R7777 asks, how do you input licenses?
So bringing in your licenses is easy. You get started by specifying the rules based on your enterprise agreement. So you can specify how the license should be measured by, such as, is it measured by a virtual CPU, is it measured by a physical cores or physical sockets. You can also specify usage limits there on if you want to control overages. You can define them as hard or soft limits, and you can also bring in any other constraints that you might have in your licensing agreements.
Awesome, thanks. And with the time left that we have, let's move over and now talk with Mike on the end about Lightsail. First, can we start out with just an introduction? I don't think all of our viewers know what Lightsail is as far as services goes, and then you can tell them about the exciting new feature we have.
Sure. So Amazon Lightsail, the way we describe it is, it's the easiest way to get started with AWS or in the cloud.
Yep.
We basically take a core set of services that developers would need to launch an application. We have load balancers, databases, instances, and we opinionate them. We do some sane defaults, we put them together to make it really easy so that in a matter of clicks, like 2 or 3 clicks, you've got an instance running, 2 or 3 clicks, you've got a load balancer running, a couple clicks, you have a database running, and you're able to deploy a highly scalable, highly available web app.
Cool. And what's the exciting new feature that we're announcing with Lightsail?
So, when we developed Lightsail, we always wanted to make sure there was a way for customers, while they may start in Lightsail, they could always grow as big as their ideas were. So you launch an application and your application blows up and you need to add capacity, for instance. What we've announced today is the ability to take instances that were created in Lightsail and export them out to EC2, right? So at the top of the show, you mentioned all the different instance types, right, for EC2. And so someone might be sitting there and they may realize this application that they created would be better served with maybe a memory optimized image. Yep. So they can take that Lightsail image, export it out, import it into EC2, and take advantage of all the features of AWS at that point.
Cool. I think we have a slide illustrating this a bit more. Do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Cool, so if we can cut over to the slide again. Great, there again.
Yeah, so it's a pretty simple process.
Okay.
In Lightsail, we have a one-click snapshot. You take your existing instance, you snapshot that instance, or your disk. You could do both your data, your disks, your volumes, or the system, the image. And then you one-click export to EC2. Once that completes, you can use a configuration wizard that we have inside of Lightsail to guide you through that process, or you can move back over to the EC2 console if you're more familiar with that, and run through a normal sort of instantiation process through EC2. Through all that, you can pick instance sizes, VPCs, the various configuration options that you'd want when you're creating a new instance inside of EC2.
Cool. What I like about this feature is, I agree with you that Lightsail really is the easiest way to get started because you don't have to make as many decisions. And so, I get analysis paralysis sometimes where I don't know what's exactly the right instance size to use or whatnot. And the pricing is really good with Lightsail too. So I think it's a great way to get started. And now I don't have to worry about if I outgrow the opinionated choices that Lightsail put in front of me. I now have a path forward to get out of that, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. The way I describe it is, for me personally, when I first started with AWS, I read, don't use your root account to do any work. Create an IAM role. And I'm like, I don't know what an IAM role is. I don't want to know. So I just jumped in with my root account. With Lightsail, we let people not have to make a bunch of decisions up front. They can immediately start building, and then they know that they've sort of got this security, the safety net that allows them to expand as far as they want to go.
Cool. Another thing that I think is really neat about Lightsail, since we have a little bit extra time, let's talk about application templates. I think this is really neat, and it makes it an easy way to get started doing more than just having a bare bones instance with nothing on it.
Right, exactly. So we use, we have a whole cadre of blueprints is what we call them. And we have both application blueprints and we have operating system only blueprints. And with those application blueprints, you can launch something like WordPress in like 30 seconds. Or if you're a developer and you want to launch something for a mean stack application, we have a mean blueprint, a Node.js blueprint. We have the Nginx, for instance.
Yep.
Now, if you look at that and you say, oh, I don't see something exactly that I want to do, we have OS-only blueprints with about 6 or 7 different distributions of Linux in which you can install anything you want. So later today at reInvent here, I'm going to do a talk on containers, and I'll use an OS-only blueprint to build a Kubernetes cluster, I'll build a Docker Swarm cluster, and I'll run containerized applications as a way of learning about those technologies before moving to something like EKS. Again, that whole idea of let's start learning in Lightsail and let's move into advanced services when the time is right. And blueprints are great. And the other thing I should mention is, I talked a lot about Linux, but we also have blueprints for Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2016, and SQL Express as well.
Cool, thanks. And maybe you could also just talk about when would you make a decision for Lightsail versus EC2?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, a question we get a lot from folks. They start in Lightsail and they say, well, when should I go to EC2 or AWS in general? And my answer is until you can't use Lightsail anymore. So you're building your application and you realize maybe I need a message queue. Now you could take a Lightsail instance and you could put RabbitMQ into it, for instance, but really what you probably want to do is use something like Amazon's message queuing services. At which point, you're probably just going to want to move the application into AWS as a whole. The other thing is vertical scaling, right? We have general purpose instances. You may get to a point where there's not enough horsepower there, so you move it into an EC2, you pick the appropriate instance size. Databases, for instance. Lightsail has a database feature, and you may be using the database feature, look at your database and realize, oh wow, it's really read intensive.
Yes.
And so I want to shard that out. Well, that's not something Lightsail databases do. So those are a couple different examples where people would look at a Lightsail technology that they started with and say, it's time for me to upgrade and grow into a full AWS service.
Awesome, great answer, thanks. With a little bit of time we have left, I want to get back to some questions from the stream. So Anoop, a question for you from Coffee and Cars on Twitch asks, do we pay anything more when we do a hibernate versus a stop action in EC2?
So it's very similar to the stop action. When the instance is hibernating, you do not pay anything for the instance usage. All you've got to pay is for the ABS standard fees, which is typically just a fraction of the instance usage fee.
Cool, great, thanks. I think that's about it for us today. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining me on stream. It's been a pleasure. I hope you all got to learn something online today too. And stay tuned for a lot more content here at reInvent throughout the day. Thanks.